There's a clip that's gone viral. I have intentionally tried not to follow the details of this too much because the whole story is just absolute tabloid trash, and I don't want to sully my mind or soul following too closely what's going on. But the broad strokes of it are that some TikTok chick had an affair with a rock star, with the singer from Maroon 5, who's married and has kids. And now she's making TikToks to get more attention, talking about how she had this affair.
I was having an affair with a man who's married to a Victoria's Secret model. At the time, I was young, I was naive, and quite frankly, I feel exploited. I wasn't in the scene like I am now, so I was definitely very easily manipulated. Maroon 5 is practically elevator music at this point, so I'm sure you know who Adam Levine is. But Adam and I were seeing each other for about a year. After I stopped talking to him over, a period of months, this is how he came back into my life. He said, okay, serious question. I'm having another baby, and if it's a boy, I really want to name it Sumner. You okay with that? Dead serious. I was like, I'm in hell. Like, I have to be in hell at this point. My morals were unknowingly compromised. I was completely manipulated.
She was totally manipulated. She's such a victim. She knowingly and willingly had a year-long affair with a married man with multiple children. But she's just such a victim, Don't you think she's such a victim? I don't, actually. I actually think she should just sort of shut up and be quiet about it and apologize to the man's wife and stop pretending that this is all about her. The only victims here are this man's wife and children. Those are the victims, okay? And the man and the woman did something very bad, and I'm not just here to shame them and moralize and wag my finger, okay? Drew Clavin has a great point. He says that every man is 2 drinks and a wink away from ruining his life, okay? I have a great terror I'm very glad that I haven't done this. I hope I never do this. I have a great terror of, this is probably the thing I fear the most. Could you imagine betraying the people who you love the most, who are so close to you? It's awful. There before the grace of God goes all of us. But if they do this terrible thing, apologize and try to atone and keep it to yourself. But we can't do that in our culture anymore because the only thing that we can do in our culture is claim to be the victim. Everything has to be about us. Everything has to be about seeking attention. And somehow everything is everyone else's fault except for our own. This is just the flip side of that same pride. That pride that says, I know everything and I'm such a genius. And I got 3 degrees at Harvard, and that's why little boys are actually little girls and we should chop off their genitals because I'm so smart. And these people look like idiots. The flip side of that is never feeling any sense of shame or guilt. If you do, because you can't do anything wrong because you're so smart and great. Right? You have to be the victim. Even at the time, you didn't think of yourself as the victim. Even as you're explaining it, it's so implausible that you would be the victim. But you have to be the victim because you're perfect. Right? This girl, in her mind, she's just absolutely perfect. She can't do anything wrong. That's the flip side of it, too. It's just that, it makes sense. Sometimes we talk about slavery as America's original sin. I don't think that's America's original sin. Original sin is America's original sin. And pride, which causes the fall, the queen of all vices, that is just absolute poison. You see it in virtually every aspect of social corruption. Now, what one wants to do, if one wants to avoid these sorts of terrible things and destroying one's life and family, would be to stay focused. And some people can't really stay focused. Speaking of focus, Joe Biden insists that he is mentally very, very focused. Some people think that he's in decline and senility and gets lost when a butterfly flies in front of his face. But no, he says he is very, very focused. Just listen to him.
How would you say your mental focus is?
Oh, it's focused. I have trouble even saying to myself my own head the number of years. I no more think of myself as being as old as I am than fly. It's just not, I haven't observed anything in terms of, there's not things I don't do now that I did before, whether it's physical or mental or anything else.
That's the polished, edited version. That's the best version that 60 Minutes could present of Joe Biden. People say I'm, and you can even see, it's kind of sad, you can see it in how vacant Joe Biden's eyes are. He's kind of got that look to him that people who are in senility have. And he says, people say I'm focused, I could fly. And there are things that I don't do things that I did, that I do things there's nothing I didn't do that I do. Shibbity-dabbity-doo. Shamanama, hamalala-ba-ba-ba-ba. You know the thing. Really, really sad. Obviously not all with it. This is why the Democrats are all circling the wagons to try to give themselves positions. I was talking to Ted Cruz about this last night. He said, he sees this pretty up close and personal in D.C. He said, you could tell for 6 months now, Buttigieg and Kamala both want to replace Biden when he obviously can't run for president in 2024. And they're already starting to stab each other in the back and go on TV as much as possible. They're already trying to do it. And when you look at the dysfunction of our system, it's tempting right now to look around the world and say, is there any better sort of system? And this is an especially good time for that because of the death of Queen Elizabeth. There's a ton of focus on the British form of government, specifically on the monarchical aspect of the British form of government and all these rituals. And there are some people in America and in Great Britain, but especially in America, who are making fun of all the rituals. Who think why on earth is some random family just given all this money and all this prestige and they're looked up to and all this pomp and circumstance and the guys wearing the funny tall hats, standing guard around. It's just like totally crazy. We would never do that kind of crazy thing in America. You saw there were these beautiful ceremonies before Queen Elizabeth was laid to rest yesterday. There were these wonderful vigils where her son, the king, and his siblings would stand vigil around the casket. Not like someone was going to come vandalize it anyway, and not like Prince Charles, now King Charles, was going to do anything about it in particular. But they just stand there, and there's a ritual, and this ritual has gone on for hundreds and hundreds of years. And Americans look at that, especially the liberal kind of Americans, they say, who needs all that stupid ritual? What they don't realize is that we have it too. I was thinking back to Ruth Bader Ginsburg's lying in state. Ruth Bader Ginsburg lies in state in, where was it? Was it in the U.S. Capitol? I don't know, some big fancy government building in D.C. And she's there, and the coffin is draped in the American flag, and there are people standing vigil and standing guard. And then at one point, as people are coming to pay their respects to the coffin, Ginsburg's personal trainer walks up and starts doing push-ups in front of the coffin as a kind of final act of loyalty and respect to Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And this happened for days and days and days. We're doing the exact same thing that the British do with their monarchy. The only difference is that we're doing it in a less dignified way for people who are much less deserving of it. The Queen gave her entire life to service of the crown and suppressed her own desires and interests all along the way and suffered all sorts of indignities. And yes, she had a palace, and yes, she had servants, and yes, she had a bunch of money, but money actually doesn't buy happiness. She didn't have the freedom of choice to do pretty much anything she wanted. Her whole life was about duty, and she did it in a very dignified way because she recognized that there are obligations in society and traditions that must be maintained. And she remained that symbol of unity for Great Britain in a period of massive social upheaval when lots of other societies did not fare nearly as well as Britain did. And she did it, and now people are paying formal respect to her as they lay her to rest. We do all that same stuff here in America. We just pretend that we don't, and it's all kind of weird and kooky, and it's for people who are not deserving of 1/1000th the sort of respect that Queen Elizabeth was. Because you can't escape this stuff. Much as we want to pretend that we're sort of radical, modernist, rationalist, Republican people who are all done with the crazy myths and pomp and circumstance of the old monarchies, we're not, because man is an incarnate being and an essentially religious being, and we're liturgical and we're ritualistic, and we need all of these sorts of things. And we must have in society things that are held sacred, and we must have shared religious and moral beliefs, and we must have shared standards. And when we get rid of the old ones, the good ideas of virtue and duty and Christianity, when we get rid of all of that, it's not like we just are left with nothing and it's an empty vacuum. What comes in is a bunch of insane new ideas to fill that space, like transgenderism and a kind of cult of personal autonomy and abortion-happy, robed lawyers that are treated in the same way as a British monarch. It's undeniable. And so the question is not, how do we get rid of all these crazy old rituals? The question is, what should the rituals be? What do we revere? What do we venerate? What do we hold sacred? I'm so glad you liked that clip. Now, hold up. You got to ring that bell. Subscribe. Get all the notifications. We'll see you next time.